before Databox, we were wasting our lives in creating reports that are PDFs and calculating spreadsheets. And it was time that was focused on the past, not really focused on the future and how we could affect our clients. And so in finding a tool like Databox where that information was ready on demand, it allowed for us to really focus on the future and focus on strategy, focus on improving metrics at a micro level to create results, at a mega level. It's really worked out fantastically for our clients and for our agency.
Remington, you and I go back. I've known you since I was in the agency world. But for everybody watching that doesn't know Remington Begg, that doesn't know Impulse, tell us a few things about the agency, where you're located, and sort of like what your specializations are.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, John. Remington from Impulse Creative. I'm the co-founder and CEO. My wife and I started the agency back in 2011, became a HubSpot partner in 2012. And that's when we really started focusing on, on growth, because it was more of a scalable mentality rather than hunt and pick. We have currently 14 employees, and I have to start actually thinking about that now. And and from a specialization standpoint, so I'm totally against the whole going in and focusing on one niche for a variety of reasons. That's
Sure.
another podcast episode, but more the T-shaped type employee that was mentioned around inbound. We have the four facets that I think every business needs is design, development, marketing, and sales expertise. And so we come in and we can help people represent their brand across all of those areas. So whether it's design, development, or strategy, we can help amongst it all.
Great. And what's your average deal size look like at this point?
Yeah. So average deal size is fun. So it's all over the map. We've got clients that are paying as much as $15,000 a month, and we've got clients paying as much as or as little as $1,500. And the fun part about this, and I'm a numbers guy to the nth degree, is we've realized that the smaller retainers are actually more profitable than the larger ones from a dollar to dollar point of view. And so I love them, even though they're not as shiny. And so that's a huge part of the business. So we're open to whatever solves our clients' problems. Right.
I like that. So you're more focused on and specialize on the specific jobs to be done, maybe more so than like a specific industry or area. So we've joked before about Impulse Creative. You're like, to me, you're an early adopter, and we've joked before.
Thanks.
I think the phrase you use is patient zero of Databox.
Yeah.
You're an early adopter in terms of an agency. So what was life like? What were you doing? What was the agency doing in terms of tracking, measuring, reporting on client performance before Databox?
Sure. So a lot of it was, for client reporting, it was a lot of the HubSpot presentation that was pre-built and kind of crappy, didn't really have a lot of the meat that was needed. So what we would do is every month, or we'd try to start thinking about the presentation a couple weeks in advance around some key wins and some losses. And so we would spend a lot of time going into that. And right before I jumped on the Databox bandwagon, I was very much into this concept of, we track every minute at Impulse, and it's something we don't just track it, we actually make based decisions off of it.
Right.
And one area that I wanted to make sure the agency did is force the whole strategic move of things rather than being a proactive agency. So that meant that we had to make the data more available to make decisions on. And so early on, I might have beat Pete. If not, it was right there to Databox, which will be a fun thing to riff on. But the idea was, how do we make the data accessible? It wasn't necessarily the shininess of it, but how do we make it accessible to a point where we can reference it and use that hour and a half each month of reporting to be an hour and a half of strategy.
Right.
And that was something that we identified early on. So, when we look at the total number of hours, it was almost an entire employee across all the accounts, and especially with our smaller retainers,
total number of hours,
very profitable.
Total number of hours just gathering data,
just reporting on a monthly basis.
Came out to basically a full-time employee.
Yeah. So right. when we looked at different visualization tools, I was trying with Google Sheets for a while, and getting the data in there really sucked. But once we came across Databox, it was pretty awesome because it's there. And now we have a conversation about results. None of the results are a surprise. And I really love the rolling 30 days rather than thinking of it as how did July do versus,
Right,
versus
in a
August.
vacuum,
Rolling
right.
30 is totally fine.
Yeah, you're kind of getting into my next question, which was like, how has life changed from an agency perspective since implementing Databox?
Yeah, so going back to that strategy thing, I knew early on that the competition in the HubSpot ecosystem was going to get more and more, and that in order to shine, we really needed to know the metrics that matter. And so we, by being able to focus on the strategy and what we're trying to accomplish for our clients, Databox really kind of tied in, and it helped in the sales process as much as the delivery from a strategy point of view. So it's been great all the way around.
That's interesting. So how so? Like, what kinds of conversations
Yeah.
were you having? How were you leveraging it during the sales process?
Yeah, so now I'm gonna pull up the kimono, but the big thing with acquisition and like the sales side of things, where a lot of times people have no idea. Like you guys put out content like crazy about Google Analytics. They've got no idea how to read Google Analytics, and it's not that the content sucks in there. It's that sometimes it's hard to get to what you really want. And so we do in the sales process is we create them a free Databox dashboard, and the dashboard would have all the metrics that we cared about and that we could affect. And so it was really easy to say, hey, so this is your current stats. This is one of our clients, and we show it in the exact same format. And we show like over the past year or whatever the time frame, and suddenly they're like, oh, like it's not just us talking about like what could be. It's like this is what we've done, and it's in
Right.
the exact same format overall. So that was huge in the sales process. And then the delivery really just allows for us to again be strategic rather than reporting just lemmings, just
Right.
throwing
Right.
things.
That's got to be a powerful visual to show during a sales
Yeah.
process. Is the reaction? Do most people have sort of that accessibility, or when they see that, do they look at you like, man, I wish I had that?
Yeah. So yes, they do. A lot of times they're like, what is this tool? But it reinforces the whole thing. Like, so as awesome as Databox is, you still have to know what metrics that you
Right.
want to track to drive result. And so it's, well, you've had Google Analytics installed in your website for 5 years. When's the last time your web developer even told you about the stats in there? We're going to have this pulling live. So that's like one confidence builder. And then the other one is, so we're defining and filtering out all of the crap that doesn't matter because we know these metrics drive success. And suddenly now they're like, oh yeah, whatever you want. It's really easy. And the display of it, especially with the new UI tweaks you guys have been doing, is just on point. It's really awesome.
I want to dig into, you kind of mentioned having to know what metrics to track, and I'm
Yeah,
curious like how those conversations go and how you're able to make those conversations sort of go smoother. So
sure.
like backing up to like goals and quarterly initiatives, or maybe even like annual initiatives. What do those conversations look like with clients?
Yeah,
I see you laughing because I would assume some people might not even know really like what like
yeah.
bigger picture goals look like. But how are you able to facilitate those discussions now, maybe in a way that you weren't able to do previously?
Sure. So especially some of our smaller clients, they might be smaller businesses that have never really been asked that question, right? I know a lot of small businesses that are quite successful that they've essentially flown by the seat of their pants, especially if they're predominantly referral-based business that's coming in. So as when the market's good, we don't pay attention to things, but when the market's not good is when we really drill down. And so we come across with everything we do from a teaching mentality. So like we got to know the numbers. Like, so what number are you trying to accomplish? It could be personal, it could be professional, like, depending on the size of the business. Obviously there's different segments. So just asking them, and we ask in the sales process, and we're pretty, we can get pretty abusive about it if we need to, but it's really more of like, so what's success? And success might have nothing to do with the number of leads. It could just be like, we want more YouTube subscribers,
Right.
like whatever they've defined as their metric. So first you have to ask the right question, but then a lot of times they don't know. They want to grow, and especially with HubSpot pushing the whole like growth company mentality, which make me vomit in the first place, because it's like, do you want to grow for the sake of growing, or do you want to grow for some reason? The focus should be around that metric that matters. And so for us, if they don't know, the number one metric that matters to us as an agency is what's the zero ROI number. So our goal is to not cost them anything. And so if they don't give us the number, then what we do is we show the 0 ROI number, and this is essentially how many customers you need in order for us not to cost you money. And then anything over that 0 is gravy. And so that's been really helpful to start getting them to think about that, because then they go, wait, I don't want to break even. And then you're like, oh, so you have a goal. Well, I'd love to make double. Okay, great. So like it allows for that conversation to start. But I don't think people think about it. And if we're hitting 0 ROI, we can exist forever, right? Because we're not actually affecting their business negatively. But if we can do more than that, then that means we're doing a great job.
Right. I like that. It's a nice little way to hack the conversation and get them thinking. So yeah, when it comes to setting those goals, when it comes time to, when the rubber hits the road and you actually document what those goals are, how do you go about sharing that, communicating that with clients, and sort of like in terms of the agency, tracking progress towards those goals on a daily, weekly, monthly basis?
Yeah, so like I teased at earlier, we don't look at anything the start of the month or the end of the month. That may be when we report on things, but it's funny because even with Databox, I've talked to a lot of agencies and they have issues with clients being unhappy about results. And it's funny because it's usually the end of the month that they report on numbers, and unless they're using Databox, they have no idea about the stats beforehand. But they're looking at those stats and they're saying, hey, these are your stats. We wish they could be better. And then 2 days later, they're billing the client. Right. And so it's like, it's really kind of wrong to have that kind of flow. So what we do is we do rolling 30. And so it doesn't matter when we have that meeting scheduled for ROI. We can look at that rolling 30 and we're like, hey, we're up over the past 30 days that were previous. So no matter when that meeting's scheduled, we're not halfway through a month or we're not halfway through, something. It makes it a lot easier to manage.
What does that meeting look like? So are they showing a few data boards? Is it like a carousel of several? What are those like? What's a typical meeting cadence? What does that look like?
Sure. So almost always it's not a carousel, because if you need a carousel to fit the metrics that matter, then you're not doing your job in regards to actually like ironing down what is actually the metrics that should drive success. So we try to fit it all on one board, and it's usually based on what's most valuable. Like if we're helping people with sales, nothing goes on our boards that we're not helping them influence. So the last thing we want is to be reporting on revenue with a client, and we actually are not helping them at all because we're doing SEO, right? Like that shouldn't even be part of the conversation. The bigger conversation maybe, but not during a reporting conversation on a monthly basis. So we'll go through and we'll highlight some of those things. Obviously, we want to know when there's peaks and valleys. We use the annotations tool to kind of annotate like certain things, because it's not about that conversation we're going to have. It's about when they forget what we said and they come back to it.
So as you go, if there's a spike, right? Yep. Your team will go in and kind of annotate, here's what happened, here's a campaign that went out, and you're both internally, your team sees that and the client sees that as well.
Correct. Yep. Nice. So we can check back on it. And then the final piece is we never send a data board by itself. So, people hire agencies to help them figure out data because they don't know to look at it, or they don't understand the thought behind it and why things have happened. And so what we do is we include a Soapbox video, Soapbox by Wistia, and it shows our face on it, and it's explaining the actual dashboard for whatever time period. So if they need to send that to their CEO or they need to send it to someone else, it's not like that game where you whisper in someone's ear and it comes out completely different message on the other side.
Sure. So when your team's reporting on this, so I like the idea that they have one data board, keeps everybody focused. Have you found, and has your team found, that in sharing this data, does it advocate more effectively for the work that you're already doing that's working? And does it allow for better conversations around here's what we should stop doing, because it sort of might remove some bias from the conversation? Like what have you seen in terms of a difference in how this data can play a role in that kind of way?
Right. So that's a great question. We've got two sides of that. So one, the client like really feels strongly because in their gut, this is going to be the best thing since sliced bread. And we're like, okay, we'll try it because we don't have data to say the contrary. So it could flop, could like absolutely just be horrendous. that's obviously going to be known right out the gate. And a lot of times when we launch campaigns, we're pivoting very quickly on things. So we see the data. So it really doesn't matter too much to us, like on launch. But when we're talking about, the peaks and the valleys, and for instance, inbound was really great to us at Impulse this year. We had a lot of really great conversations. We had a lot of traffic that went in. We have a pretty big spike in direct traffic because there's a lot of people seeing our name, hearing our name, and that kind of thing. And so by that happening, the normal person would be like, holy crap, what happened? But we were able to annotate that, identify that was because that was the same time as inbound, and we were tweeting like mad people, and then the other side was that, we'll be able to reference that later or in 30 days. And we're like, what the heck were we doing at this time? It's the same thing with the clients. So sometimes those trade shows that clients do aren't really on the radar for a marketer. But if you see those spikes and you ask that question, if you see a spike in direct, you should ask the client what they're doing. And sometimes they're not, oh, I should have told you that, right? It forces that conversation for it to be a one team kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so that's been really good. But in regards to like buy-in and everything, I think a level of transparency is there. But at the same time, I look at Databox as like the guardrails to actually focusing on what matters, if that makes sense.
Right. I like that. I know you've explained that, but expand, like unpack that a bit when you say guardrails.
Yeah. So I remember back in the days of the PDFs from HubSpot. I actually don't even think, are those even sending anymore? I don't know. We must have them turned off, but that's a great thing to check into. Yeah. But I remember like we wouldn't be tracking customers for clients, right? Because they were like small businesses and they didn't give us the info. But on every single one of those presentations, it would say your traffic is here, your leads are here, your customers are 0. And they're like, why can't we have more customers? And it's
a
like,
reasonable question.
Sure. But if we're not helping them with that segment of the business, there should be no reason why that would even be in the presentation. And unfortunately, it was baked into the imagery of those things. So, that was an early on lesson. But yeah, it's just one of those things that if we don't care about customer acquisition, we care about opportunities because that's what we have the power to affect, then let's show the number of opportunities generated. Customers can be a great success metric that may not be on a dashboard, but a CEO, if we make a dashboard for the CEO, he might care about big picture stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Where if we're talking to a marketing manager, they may only care about the number of MQLs, and you should only be having conversations with what matters because there's all sorts of chasms you can fall into. Right. There's no need to have those conversations in the first place.
Sure. And so in terms of, this is sort of it's a bigger picture question, but it's also one that could get into the weeds too. But what type of impact has having these sort of real-time insights, real-time visibility into the data that allows you to kind of step away from just gathering data and spend more time mm-hmm. on analyzing it, as you said? What kind of impact has that had overall on your team's ability to sort of make adjustments and ultimately hit the goals that you set out with clients at the outset of an engagement?
So it's a great question. So before we switched to the 30-day rolling, we had just month to date. Month to date fosters the same the same like repetition and feedback that you would get from like a HubSpot report, because it gives you all the data at the end that you could like reference. Right. Right. And so there's seasonality to that. There's a variety of different issues with that. But when you go 30-day, it doesn't matter what day you look at it, you can see, is everything green? It could be green by one extra visit or one extra lead. Is it green or not? And if it isn't, you're able to ask that question in a very finite way. Like yesterday, our traffic was up. We broke 10,000 visitors total coming into the site on a monthly basis. And that was like, awesome. That's the first time we broke that. Super excited. So anyone that looked at that on a monthly chart would be like, woo, we won. And then today it's under, right? Because that means that 30 days ago, we had a really good day, and it allows for us to go back and take a look at that and figure out what the heck is going on. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah. So it sounds like, yeah, it's a more honest way, for lack of a better word that I can think of right now, of staying true to
more
the data.
Micro.
Right.
And more micro. Like you look at a whole month, it's hard to unpack that data and figure out why the month actually was better or worse. Like you might look at tactics where you can look at cause and effect a lot better. Like if you're looking at that 30-day rolling and you peak 200 extra visits, you're going to look at other sources, and hopefully I did a data snack on like one of the ones that we have, but it breaks down. You should see that same dip where it was the previous period.
What type of conversations have you, like, has this changed sort of the dynamic between account facing folks on the team? Like, are people having more conversations about making adjustments, on the fly? And have you noticed any of that since implementing Databox, that's sort of fostered that kind of culture?
Yeah, so especially with content delivery. So if the clients and this helps in this regard. So if you have a good constant stream, usually you're going to see more constant uptick in organic or like general traffic to your site. When you skip that, you start to see that ebbs and flow, right? Like one of our clients has a list of 10,000 people that they would send their blog out to, on the daily notifications. Well, they really didn't think about the fact that those people actually come back to their website. But then suddenly when they start seeing the traffic spikes and they're like, oh, every Thursday when we send out this blog, we get 10,000 people that come to the website. Not 10,000, but like a large segment of them. Suddenly they're like, oh, that means they're coming back to the website. And it's funny how that stuff doesn't usually click. Like you go, oh, we had 15 people click. Yeah, where did they click? Like where did they go? Right. So it allows those micro conversations to kind of happen naturally. And again, all that time that you would be working on creating a report is now questioning things, and we question everything. I usually blow up things on a monthly basis in general, but yeah, it allows for those things to happen more organically.
That's great. Hey, Remington, this has been great. Thanks for being so open and sharing all this information. Love hearing about this stuff. Always been a big fan of Impulse. Thank you. Look forward to continue watching, what you guys do. So air high five. Thanks for all your help, and go Impulse.
Awesome. Thanks.